All right, what's up everybody? So today's video is going to be the laws of the rep goal system. More specifically, the laws that I follow in the rep goal system that has made me progress. And I attribute my success with this method to strictly following these 5 rules that if I didn't follow, I would probably be abusing the method more than I would actually be using it. I still see some people misusing and misunderstanding how the rep goal system is designed to work, or at least the way that I think is best in terms of hypertrophy. So I want to clear a couple things up, show you guys the best way to use this method and the 5 principles of how to actually get the most that you can out of this method. And I don't just want to tell you what to do, because that's not what this channel is about. This channel is about showing you and teaching you and making you understand how this stuff works, because if you don't understand what you're doing and you just know what to do, you're probably going to start to question things and mess things up. It's better to know why you're doing something and not just what to do, and that applies to most things within lifting, at least in my experience. There's a lot of things that I've known to do, but I didn't know why I was doing it, and therefore I did it wrong. If I knew why I was doing that thing, that would lead me to more success in whatever that thing is. So law number 1 is going to be don't force it. And the name almost implies that you should be forcing it. With the term goal in the name, it implies that you're shooting for it. You're shooting for the goal. And it almost tricks us into thinking that it is something we should be going above and beyond to try and hit. But at the same time, that's going to be a double-edged sword with hypertrophy, and I'll dive into that in the later laws of this video. But let's start with this first one, don't force it. This is a perfect example of a situation where the harder you try, the worse it gets. Don't hide your plateau with false progression. If you're actually plateaued, you need to know that so that you can make the changes necessary to break through it. Forcing a rep goal is just pushing the problem to tomorrow. When you're trying to force something, you're pulling away from what actually will lead to you hitting that goal. When I was prioritizing strength over hypertrophy, which was the end of a long journey in terms of my mindset and approach to training, when strength somehow became my priority, I actually hit more plateaus. I was mistaking the progression with the causation, and I lost sight of what I was actually looking for and got way too caught up in the method to the point where I ruined the method. It's the same thing with, say, dating. Like, the harder you try to search for the right person, you're never going to find the right person. Every time somebody meets that perfect person, it kind of just happens naturally and when you're least expecting it. It's the same thing with lifting. I know it's kind of a funny example, but when you're training and you're just doing yourself and keeping it right and training properly, the strength will kind of just naturally come. And this is just my experience. I know a lot of people don't experience this, and I think it's because you're chasing the strength. You're not chasing the hypertrophy fundamentals that actually give you the growth, which leads to the progression in the rep goal system. Number 2, and this might contradict at first glance my first point, which is don't force it. Like, take a step back and don't force it. But you have to know where to actually apply that kind of aggression and that killer instinct. I think this is an important factor to training, and I don't want you to confuse taking a step back and not trying to force growth in your training with just training easy. This one's more for the beginners, but you need to know where to apply that aggression and that force and that killer instinct. With this, it might sound like a contradiction to my last point, but there are 2 ways to handle the killer instinct we have in our training. You can apply it to training properly with good technique and put your focus and aggression and force into that, or you can use it as just an excuse to be lazy. I know most of you guys, you don't need to hear that. That's very redundant. You get told that 1,000 times. But for the beginners, if you're not making any progress, you're probably just taking a step back too far, and it's as simple as that. Number 3 is an important one. This is a fundamental foundation to my philosophy in training, and this is something that we all start to lose sight of at some point because of the brainwashing and the lies that are out there. This is one principle that my channel and my entire philosophy for training is built on, and that's that growth causes the progression. Of course, progression can lead to more growth, and it's a cycle, but most of your progression is going to come from the gains that you see in terms of your muscle mass. And we need to always remember that. We have to remember what we're actually chasing. We're not chasing the progression, we're chasing the growth. In turn, the byproduct we get is progression in our performance. The growth will come if you're doing it right, and that will lead to progression within your training. If the progression isn't happening, you're not growing. Changing technique just to get more reps won't fix the issue. We need to end our attachment to strength standards and end our attachment to the numbers. So we just have to use it as another measuring tool, just like we'd measure our muscles or our body weight or take progress photos. This is a lie that's been pushed on us for a long time, and we've fallen for it because it's an easy way out. It's a coward's way out in terms of the mindset. This is the crazy oversimplified approach that when we take up this philosophy in training, that we just need to chase numbers and the size will come, that's the coward's way out in terms of mindset. And that's how I used to be. That's how a lot of us still are. And we need to recognize that to break past that mindset. That's like it's just way too simple. Hypertrophy training is a little bit more complex than that. And it's not even just that that's completely false and incorrect. It's that you're viewing it in a way that focuses you more on the outcome than what causes that outcome in the first place. It's a brutally watered down, oversimplified way of looking at hypertrophy training. So this is an important one. Let's break it down a little bit. The first point that I mentioned with this law number 3 is that if progression isn't happening, you're not growing. And a lot of people are going to be scared of that. And the reason that you're scared of that is because you don't understand what progress actually is and the rate that you need to be progressing at. There's no one answer that myself or a YouTuber can give you. It's up to you to understand what your rate of progression should be. All I'm going to say is think about the progress that you're currently seeing. Put that into the long term at scale and see what that is, and see if those numbers seem about realistic or possible. I get some people that talk about, I only added 5 pounds to this lift over the past, I don't know, 5 weeks, let's just say a month. If you only added 5 pounds to that lift in a month, what do you think's going to happen? Do you think that's bad? Like, let's look at that over the course of it. That's 60 pounds in a year. That's 120 pounds in 2 years. And I'm not saying that we're able to sustain that progression forever, but you guys, you have to zoom out. A lot of the time, these progressions that we make are so long-term. We get way too caught up in the day-to-day, week-to-week stuff. The progression is what's happened long-term. A classic example is going to be my year of training in 2022. I started a new log back in January, and it's sitting over there on the ground. I don't even remember adding weight or adding reps to many lifts because it's such a slow, gradual process. It's like +1 rep here, add 5 pounds there every now and then, and I haven't plateaued at all, and everything has gone up significantly, way more than I remember. So that's the importance of checking your training logs over a longer period of time. If you get too caught up in the short-term progressions, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot because that's going to lead to false progression. It's going to lead to artificial progressive overload, like I've talked about before. It's an issue that you'll run into. So I'm not saying to stick at the same weight forever or stick in the same reps forever. Obviously, it's a slow, longer-term progression, and that's why the rep goal system is so great for this. Check your logs, not just last week. Check them from 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Most of you guys will be surprised at how fast your progression has actually gone. Most of us are progressing way faster than we think. We think we're in a plateau if we don't progress in like 1 or 2 weeks, and you just have to zoom out. You really do. Law number 4 is going to be to actually monitor your progress. Based on my last point, you need to actually be monitoring progress to realize if you're progressing or not. If you're putting all your eggs in one basket by only assessing performance in the gym, you're shooting yourself in the foot. The more methods of monitoring progress you have, the more opportunities you have to discover a plateau, or the opposite, and discover you're making progress without realizing it. With the rep goal system, making progress is your responsibility, and that's what separates it from some other versions of progressive overload. This is going to be important because you need to actually understand what your body weight is, what your measurements are, and take some progress photos on top of what you're already doing. I've said this a few times, but we heavily bias our training numbers. Most of the comments I see are talking about their training numbers, progression, weight, reps, all this stuff. And then when I ask someone how much they weigh or how their body weight has changed in that period of time, they haven't weighed themselves in 2 months. And it's like, what do you expect? What if you lost 5 pounds in the past 2 months? Does that make sense now that your training numbers aren't going anywhere? Like, this is the stuff you actually have to think about. You have to monitor more than just your training, because if you're losing weight or if you're gaining weight at a rapid rate, that can fluctuate your numbers. And the same goes for recomp. Like, if you guys are in a recomp, whether it's by choice or because you just don't want to cut or bulk, then what are you expecting when your training is going slow and your numbers aren't moving that much? Recomping's real. You can do it, and I've done it before. But if you think you're going to be making these ridiculously fast performance gains in the gym in the middle of a recomp, you have to understand, you have to manage your expectations a little bit. You can't expect genetic freak on a lean bulk type of growth and type of gains in performance when you're a normal person and you're recomping. It's two completely different things. And that goes for cutting too. If you're dieting and you're losing weight at a rapid rate, that rhymed, bars, you can't expect to be hitting all these PRs and just making continual progress. Even if your strength and your performance dips slightly, but your body weight dips a lot, that's still progression. Even if you maintain your strength and you're losing body weight, that's a sign that you're maintaining and probably building a little bit of muscle, even in a little bit of a calorie deficit as you're losing weight. So you have to measure your body weight. You have to take progress pictures. You have to do measurements too. Compare your waist to shoulder ratios, waist to arm ratios. Compare your arm now to your arm a month ago. Stuff like this is the best way to monitor progress. I recommend you do it every month. That's the perfect way to do it. I know some people think it's inconvenient, but it's like, you can't do 2 minutes a month. Like, come on, guys, measure your muscles. Get a tape measure. You can get one for like $3 on Amazon, or you can even get a digital one that tells you what number it is for $25. It's a battery operated digital tape measure. It literally does the measuring for me. I just wrap it around my arm and flex, and it tells me that number on a screen, and I just log that on a spreadsheet. It's so simple. A training log is the most annoying thing to do. A training log's a pain in the ass, having to take out your phone or a pen and paper between every set. Like, that's ridiculous. That's the most inconvenient, and obviously still do it. This is kind of a joke, but what I'm trying to say is body weight measurements are ridiculously easy. Same with progress photos. You don't even have to do them that often. Like, once a month is totally fine. Monitor your progress. And the final one, law number 5, is that technique beats out performance. And this is the key to actually making progress long-term in the gym in terms of building muscle. Sacrificing your technique for short-term progression is shooting yourself in the foot. You're getting too greedy. You need to develop more patience. Your technique is something that will allow you to build more muscle, which is a slow process. So you won't see it immediately. You won't see it all the time. It's a slow, gradual process. But with that, you're going to surpass the person that goes for the numbers all the time. I saw that within my own training. Take when I was a power builder and I was just focused on powerlifting to get bigger, my numbers skyrocketed up real quick because I was just changing my technique and giving myself a bigger advantage for each lift. But then I hit the hardest plateau because my sets weren't very stimulative. Take my training now, I haven't plateaued in like almost a year and a half or 2 years now. It's unreal. And it's because I'm slow and steady. I'm allowing myself time to build muscle, and I have the room to continue to see progression in the gym due to that muscular growth, due to my technique and the training that I actually use that builds me a decent amount of muscle. It's important. The last thing you want to do is turn a blind eye to poor technique. This is a mistake I made for so long that literally turned me into a powerlifter. And I know I might be an extreme example, but I know there's a lot of other people like me. Like, believe me, I've been in that power building aesthetics type community before for longer than I should have been. I'm not alone. There's a lot of other people like that. It literally turned me to a powerlifter. I was so addicted to progress and worried I'd lose my size if I lost performance due to resetting technique. So when I was benching like 290 for a 5x5, I was worried that if I made my technique better and went down to 260 or 250 for a 5x5 with the same proximity to failure and everything, but with a better range of motion and just less weight, I thought I would lose size, because I was told that the number you are at is directly correlated to how big you are. So in my mind, my chest was 290, and I was like, well, if I work at 250, my chest is going to be 250. Of course, it's ridiculous looking back at it, but you have to understand that even someone like myself, who has a pretty good understanding of lifting, is still able to be brainwashed by these methods. And these are the lies that you see all the time. And there's not one particular person that was just pushing this stuff all the time. Obviously, there's a lot of different people, but this is like, you go on comments anywhere on Instagram, YouTube, you look at like most influencers, and they just push this idea out there because it's the oversimplified answer that they can just say to shut people up, and it brainwashes people. I don't know if everybody's just saying it because they're just lazy and they don't want to explain things to people, or if they just genuinely think that that's the case. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And it makes me upset because so many people, even now, even people that have been watching my channel for the entire duration that I've had it, which isn't that long, but still, it's been, 9 months now, they're still too attached to their numbers, and they're still too focused on their numbers. And it's good to monitor your numbers, but we have like an emotional attachment for some reason, and we need to break past that. We need to understand that hypertrophy training, building muscle in general, that's not the biggest factor. It's just a factor, and there's a lot of factors, and we need to make sure that they're all performing well to build us muscle. Don't go down that road. That's all I'm going to say. Don't go down that road. Don't even go close to going down that road. Turn around as soon as you notice that you're on it. The performance that you're losing isn't real performance. I've talked about this in one of my previous videos. As you start to sacrifice your technique and sacrifice your hypertrophy fundamentals just to chase the numbers, you're sacrificing something. And the odds are that something that you're sacrificing is a factor that would lead to more hypertrophy from that set. The things that we sacrifice in our technique and in our training to get bigger numbers are going to be things that directly lead to hypertrophy, whether it's extra volume or even within a given lift, the range of motion, the bar speed, the proximity to failure, all these things that give us hypertrophy, we can sacrifice to give us more strength. And that is obviously an issue because you're tricking yourself into thinking you're making progress, but it's not even that you're plateaued, it's that your workouts are now giving you less hypertrophy. So if you thought you were plateaued before, now you're getting even less stimulus from them, and you're just going to keep pushing yourself down a farther road. And if you refuse to accept that you're actually in a plateau, you're just going to keep driving yourself farther and farther into like powerlifting type methods. And I'm not just talking specifically squat, bench, deadlift, competition powerlifting. This happens for any movement. This can happen with your curls, your overhead extensions, your whatever, you name it. It can happen to any lift, that powerlifting 1 rep max or rep max type mindset. And that's going to plague your lifting. You need to break away from that mindset. I'm going to leave the video at that. If you have any questions or comments, definitely let me know, and I would love to hear what you have to say.